Hello everyone, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for another YouTube question and answer video this week. If you're new to the channel, I always say just feel free to subscribe and like and share and comment, and also send your own question in. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer on these weekly videos, just go to my website at themodernshaman.net. And there's a contact form on there. You type your question in and it gets sent to me or someone in my team, and then they forward it to me. So I will eventually get to your question if you'd like to send it in. Also, I always just remind you guys that if you'd like to set up a one-on-one session for a private reading on the phone, on Skype, or in person in my office here in San Antonio, Texas, please go to the website as well. That's always available. This is what I do for a full-time job. I'm a shaman and a psychic, so I'm always open to tuning in and helping heal and just bring you spiritual alignment and messages from the soul. That's at the website, themodernshaman.net. Okay, so here is the question for this week. So it was long, and I abbreviated bits of it, kind of skipped through and picked out the parts that I felt like would be relevant. So it says, "Hi Rachel, I wanted to ask your guidance. I have a friend who was telling me that her 5-year-old son was very different for the first 4 years of his life. He was fairly hateful and would have a very maniacal laugh and episodes of pacing in the middle of the night, angry and upset and destroying things, until he eventually would collapse. In the morning, he would not remember any of these episodes, but my friend was often terrified and didn't know what was going on. For the past year, he's been very different and is clearly an old soul with great wisdom and sensitivity. He tends to not like many people and is very good with boundaries and is very direct. I was wondering if you had any idea or might have been through any of those things in the early years and at night in particular. Perhaps you've had those type of experiences and could shed any light. With blessings and gratitude." Okay, so she sent this question in a while back, and it's taken me some time to get to it because I have so many questions on my list that you guys send in, which is wonderful. But children are such an interesting study. We can learn a lot from children, even our own childhood, and looking back into that. And as I have been teaching psychic development for a long time and mentoring people in their own intuitive connections so often, not all the time, but it's very common that the strongest time that we felt our psychic connections was in our childhood. So there's a lot of reasons for that. And I do have personal experience with this, with my own children, which I can go into, as well as those that I've just mentored and had sessions with, whether it be the parents of children that are experiencing similar things or just helping people learn to integrate, or going back to their childhood and looking through, like I said, their own psychic connections and when they felt the strongest to their multidimensional aspects. So where do I want to start with your question? Let's start with the story first, okay? And then I will go into a little bit of maybe some helpful techniques or things to be conscious and aware of. And that's the teacher in me that always wants to give options for help, but it may not be relevant for you. I just always share in an energy of just sharing, of the collective, of being in a high vibrational state, which is one of share and collaboration, unity, consciousness for all of us. Whether it's relevant for you, it's completely up to you and your vibrational state, and that's beautiful. It's perfect. If you don't align, that's exactly where you're supposed to bounce off. If you do, then you do. All that being said, so the story I will start with is my middle son had similar experiences in the dream state. And I will say it's been something that I've noticed, that if someone's particularly empathic or clairsentient, the psychic sense of clairsentience, where they feel a lot of emotional energy and they read energy and are translating and communicating through energy more than they are language, more than they are any other form, if that's their dominant kind of psychic sense. It seems to be that if that is true for them, then they process the emotional energy of multiple timelines more so than others. And because when you're a child, there is a time differential, or it takes longer time, or you're going through a process of integration into the form. This is a new human body for you. And I say new, but this is you're new into this timeline, and there is a time of integration. There's a time of building up your auric field, which is a creation essentially of psychic boundaries. And typically that's not solidified, like the out of your auric field is not fully built until you're around age 8. Now that's shifting a lot and varies a lot, especially with these new kids coming in. A lot of them are very old souls, indigo children, crystal children. It's so common. I feel like pretty much everybody coming in is an old soul in some way, shape, or form. Now that doesn't mean that they show up the same way. They're very different, and all of my children are very different in the way that they process and integrate their connections to the multidimensional realm, although they are all old souls. So, but he in particular, my middle child, used to have night terrors similar to this. Sometimes he would sleepwalk, but mostly it was a lot of the thrashing and the screaming and just all sorts of physical kind of violent aspects to him. And he would not remember it in the morning. Sometimes he would have a little bit of consciousness connected to it, but most of it was just the emotional residue, okay? And he would be, and he's the most empathic of all my children. Definitely receives, he's also a healer. He has a tendency towards animals, meaning, again, nonverbal communication, energy to energy. And a lot of people that are empathic are very drawn to animals and feel like communication with animals is very easy as well. Because they're not communicating verbally as their dominant form of communication. They're picking up the energy before they are the words and the languaging. So, all that being said, as time went on, he worked through that integration piece. When he was going through that as a mother and a psychic shaman that I was very concerned. And I went through different phases of what to do. One of the things that I did in my own meditation was I asked Spirit, I wanted to see, because I can see past lives. And when I say past lives, these lives are going on simultaneously. There is no time on the other side. So these are simultaneous multidimensional lives. And as a child is growing, they're trying to vibrationally choose this frequency more often, and then it becomes more of a dominant vibration to be here more than they are on the other timelines. But those other timelines exist, and for people who are particularly, or children who are particularly susceptible to emotional energy, meaning they're reading the energy before they're reading the languaging, they may feel the energy that is very strong in other timelines. And when I say strong, there's a density to traumatic events, to anger, to negative polaric experiences. And I'm not judging them. I'm just saying they have a denser energy. They're heavier than light, right? Just in terms of science, okay? If you were to get into the density of particular energies, thoughts, and we know that thought is energy and all of this. All that being said, so they're a little longer to process through the form. All right. So this is why it takes us a little bit more time to work through traumatic experiences, because they have a denser, thicker energy. It's just like if you're walking through water versus air, there's a density that you're having. It takes a little bit more momentum and time to move through if you're on a linear timeline in this 3D experience, right? So it just took him time. And I know I started on the story, but I didn't go back to it. But I would, in my own meditations, ask to see that timeline that he was having to process, because I could tell, and he was cognizant enough to remember bits and pieces from what he was experiencing. Some nights he would just say, I felt like I was drowning, or he would remember little things. Like, he would go through these episodes for a long time, but essentially I asked Spirit to see that lifetime. And so in my own meditation, I just went to that past life that he was trying to integrate or process emotionally. And that's what he was going through. A lot of those night terrors had to do with a traumatic life that he was processing at that time. And I saw essentially a few different lifetimes. The night terrors looked different at different times. So I could tell he was processing and integrating different timelines. They weren't always the same. Although the emotional residue was similar when it was a particularly physically traumatic event. And without going into details, there were some just physically very difficult lifetimes for my child. And so he was processing the energy of that. And because, again, he's predominantly clairsentient, he was having to process a lot of that and figure out how to integrate that energy or what to do with that energy through his current form. Now, and time does help that. It just, depending on how intense and how many lives had those type of traumatic experiences. And life on Earth is, just if you know history at all, it's a very intense planet with we've just had a lot of hard times. And life was very intense for many, many millennia. And so there's a lot that many of us have to process. One thing is that it takes time to build up their energetic protection. All right, this is why, and I've shared this before, a lot of children use adults who have a fully formed auric field. Your auric field is created by the spin of your chakras, and your chakras are energetic organs, remember, just like our physical organs. So they take time to develop and grow. And a child organ is just not as strong as an adult. It's been utilized for longer, so there's a sense of strength to it. So a lot of times children will stand behind an adult as a sense of protection. This is a telltale sign that they are feeling the energy of strength that the adult provides for them from their own auric field, and they're standing under that sense of umbrella from it. This just takes time to develop, and that's a very normal thing. Also, just to encourage you, if this is your child or if they're going through a sense of processing and you notice, and I know you kind of mentioned that he was an old soul and very sensitive. Sensitive is a term, or highly sensitive person. This is actually a psychological term that's been accepted now within the medical field. And essentially it's an empath or an intuitive that has an activated or dominant clairsentient psychic sense. And if this is your child, just be conscious that they may have more energetic residue that they have to process, okay? They may feel it more than others, like my other children, that's not their dominant psychic sense, and so they're able to move through the multidimensional, the other aspects of timelines and parallel existences with much more ease and flow, and let it go and choose this dominant energy. So they may have more ease with that. So if that is normal, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be conscious of it as a parent, I think, to hold space for your child. And I don't know if I was to go back and do it again, I don't know that I would choose to look at the timelines of my children as they were processing that trauma, because that's hard to see your child going through those things, and I don't think I would choose to go through that again. If you as an adult are trying to help, there are other ways to do it than just wanting to see what it is they're going through. It was the first time I had been through that with my own child, and because he was my middle child and my first child didn't have that and isn't as empathic, that was just like, I want to see what's going on. And because I can do that and have access to internal vision in terms of looking at timelines and seeing past, present lives, future lives, I went at it that way. But I don't know that is the most easy emotional space for a mother to jump in and see her child being traumatized. I would choose, or I would suggest, if you're in that situation and you have that option, to go a more peaceful route, which is essentially creating a sense of space. I have a video on empathic children, but if your child is sensitive in certain ways to emotional energy and is having to process all of this, I would just make sure that upon waking, there's a time of subtle integration, energetic integration. And this is the same with even adults that may feel like their emotional body takes time to integrate. I love that you said that he already has really strong boundaries. Then he is intuitively linked up in following that, because boundaries are huge. And as a parent, we need to validate what our child and listen when they say, I need space, I need the radio or the TV turned off. That was something, also a lot of empaths are very sensitive to frequencies and inner ear issues and sound and sharp sounds. Or I know my middle son is also very sensitive when there's an airplane or a helicopter overhead, music even on the radio. I tend to like, let's turn on the radio, and he's like, I don't want any sound. So being aware and conscious that they are processing energy more than others, meaning they're more conscious of the processing and have to have a sense of space for it. Physical space is a big one also, like giving them a place where they can go that feels quiet. Sometimes those like headphones that help push out any sounds are helpful. Meditation practices, even just breathing work. And animals are huge because they don't have kind of a fight back energetically. So animals that feel calming, that can align in a sense of harmony really easily with them are huge. And then I would just encourage you to continue empowering them. And I know I'm speaking of children, but this doesn't just apply to children. It goes across the board. And empowerment is so important within the spiritual process, because it takes a sense of stance in your own free will. And this is where you have your sense of boundaries in the physical and in the non-physical realm. This is where you teach your child to laugh at any sort of spirits that are trying to scare them, if there is a sense of interaction and they're feeling, and just ask them, do you feel like there's other energies present? Do you feel like you're seeing angels or aliens, or you're feeling scary shadows? Or just have an open heart without judgment, of a safe space that they can dialogue or shake their head up and down, whatever they can and give them a sense of empowerment in that space. Give them some tools, whether it be spray that has an essential oil of sage or clearing. Sometimes kids like that physical element of like, go away, especially when they're young. Or saying that, you can't be here, or leave. And with my youngest daughter, whenever she feels any sort of energies that create fear, she always stomps. There's a sense of physical alignment with like, I mean it. And kids sometimes can really align with that sense of empowerment. This is a physical integration of the form, and so it can be very helpful for children to integrate through the form. A lot of times they're trying to do this anyway. They intuitively know this. This is why their tantrums also usually include their hands or pounding. There's a sense of physical form that's trying to integrate and process the energy. So it's really helpful for them to have a physical posturing aligned with what they're saying. Especially when they feel like they don't have a sense of safety because their auric field is just not as strong yet. So they may have to take a stronger stance towards the non-physical. But I feel like what you express, it's common enough. It's common enough, especially with people and children who are sensitive to energy and having to process a lot of that through the form and are new to the form. So it takes them a little longer even to choose this vibrational core frequency as their dominant one, meaning they may be still present in a lot of other multidimensional realms, as we all are, but they've only been in this form for a little bit of time, and so it's not their core vibrational frequency, meaning it's not chosen as often. It's like somebody who's constantly changing the channels on the TV versus staying on one channel for a while. When you're younger, also you're sleeping more often, so you're in these other realms. Newborns, they're taking naps a lot more, so they're more present in these other realms vibrationally, and so the integration time may seem like they may seem out of body for a little bit, of like, where am I? It just may take them a little longer to get a core frequency that's in resonance with this timeline. And that's also normal. It takes time to integrate, and it gets a little bit more and more dominant the older we get, and the less we're essentially in those other realms, are conscious and participatory in those realms. So hope that's helpful to you guys. We'll be back here next week for another video. Stay tuned. Blessings.